start by looking at the portrait avatar. This is in the prefabs folder, and it has a portrait 3D on it. Opening up the prefab, we see that we have the avatar camera and a your character here empty game object. And this is because your character needs to go here. I don't have your character is in your game, so you need to set up this yourself. The best way to go about this is to duplicate this and set up the portrait avatar just for you. Now, we can see this in action here in the demo prefabs. If you go to the demo scenes, the demo prefabs, we have the portrait avatar demo 3D. Let's go ahead and load this up. So this also has a portrait 3D on it, and it also has our demo avatar loader. Every portrait will be this object. What is shown in the portrait is entirely up to you. So for this demo, we just have a bunch of different head materials, and then when we instantiate these portraits, they get random head materials assigned. Most likely you'll have some sort of similar loader class. You're gonna have to make that yourself because, like I said, it's your game, your characters. I don't know what's in your game. You do, hopefully. So make it yourself. In this case, this is our demo character. We have our body and our head. If you have a humanoid or other character, this is the analog to that, just the character in the system, and make sure that the avatar camera is staring at it. And then when you do press play and you load up one of these, you can see that they show up under the portrait avatar's parent, and you can adjust the camera here and just bring it forward and back and get the look you want. So if you want something really close, you can do that. Then copy the settings and paste it into the prefab. We also have the lighting here. This is an option if you'd like to do it. You don't have to use lighting, but I find it's very nice to have lighting on the character. We have the front light and we have some backlight here. The lights are inside the portrait 3D here. In most cases, the 256 by 256 for the render texture is sufficient. But if you find you need more resolution, you can increase that. If you need less resolution, if it's a small portrait, then you can decrease that and save some resources. Once you save that prefab, go to your portrait avatar parent and drag it over into this portrait avatar 3D prefab. The prefabs folder has the portrait avatar parent on it. So all you have to do is drag that into your scene. In the demo, we have it set up under the player character, and that way as we move around, the lighting in the scene affects these 3D avatars. While we have it open, let's go ahead and check out what the model actually looks like. Now you might notice that this character is very, very small, and that is on purpose. And we want a minimal amount of space between the camera and the object because if something comes between them, you will see it in the portraits. That's the side effect of having real-time lighting. As you can see in this example, the collider for the player is this capsule right here, and the avatar cameras are within that, and so is the demo character. That means that in the game, when we get close to a wall, the character and camera will still be within that sphere, and in most cases, things won't pass the collision of the player sphere. In order to achieve that, I've set the spawn position to be 1.2 and negative 0.33, just a little bit back from center for each of the 3D avatars. The 2D portraits are actually stored slightly differently. If we open up the canvas here, we find the UI portraits panel. This is where our portraits live in the UI system. This object has a portraits panel component on it, and that includes a reference to the UI portrait prefab. Now, when you load up this prefab, it really doesn't look good at all, so there's a better way of managing the prefab. We're going to go back to the scene here, and as you can see, I actually have the UI portrait already here as a child of the portrait's parent. I'm just going to turn that on, and now we see the prefab in context, how it will look in the game. Now when we open the prefab in context, we can easily see what it would look like and we can make edits. This is the UI portrait for both 3D and 2D avatars. 3D avatars will use the raw image, 2D will use the image. Everything else here is optional. You can replace them, you can update them, you can create your own. As you can see here, we also have a health bar, very simple health bar that you can of course delete, but this is here as an example of how you can expand upon this to make these portraits really your own, add additional code, additional logic, and make these work for your game the way you want them to work. The UI portrait has references here to the raw image and to the image. Those are both the children of this. We also have the border and background image listed in the UI images. That, like the lights in the 3D avatar, is what the portrait's avatar uses to change the color and lighting in the scene. So let's load up a few 3D portraits and a few 2D portraits. Keep in mind you can only have as many 3D portraits as layers you've created. Each one needs to be in its own layer, but you can have an unlimited number of 2D portraits. Now when we set a random border color in the demo scene, we can see that updating here in Portraits Avatars. This button is basically calling a method on portrait avatars to update that color, and we can see the color changing in the scene. There is a 1-second fade for any color changes. We can scale these up as well. And for the 3D portraits, we can even change the light color. And again, you can see that change. It is a 1-second fade for those as well. So the last thing is you might be wondering how we got the 2D portraits to show up in that image. We're using the game controller for that. We have a list of sprites here. These are all the different portraits. These do come with the project if you'd like, or you can use your own portraits or get some from the asset store, including the Infinity PBR portrait packages. And this has a load 2D portrait method. This is what we're calling from this UI button here. The key aspect here is that we are getting a new avatar by calling portrait avatars instance create 2D portrait. That creates the 2D portrait in the scene. And then later we will set the sprite. The system itself, of course, doesn't know what you want to put in it, so you're going to have to code it yourself and tell the system what to put in there. Luckily, whenever you do create a 2D or 3D portrait, an in-game portrait is returned, and the in-game portrait has set sprite method right here. So that's all there is to setting up your own 3D, 2D, and UI portraits. If you have any questions, come to the Discord. It's pretty easy to operate. Once you set it up, you just click one button in your UI, or you call one line of code in order to create new portraits, and then all the custom code that you write will manage the actual content of the portrait itself. Don't forget the portraits work really, really well with the runtime color sampler, which would allow those colors of the border to be automatically set to the colors of the lighting condition around the player object. Not just the borders, but you can set the color of the image and raw image, the background of the avatar camera, or any other UI element. So definitely check out that and how these two packages work really well together. Have a great